I think it might be nice just to use maybe another colour, maybe a yellow, just for the hell of it, just to brighten up the picture a bit. And I'm going to use another colour, maybe a kind of reddish orange perhaps, a very, very light dilution. Like a pink really. And that will just add some interest really. Okay, you can see here at the moment the colour's really quite weak, and that's fine. Now I'm going to start painting the cathedral, Norwich Cathedral in the middle there. I'm going to use maybe yellow, gold, slightly creamy looking colour. I'm using a mixture of ochre and yellow there to achieve that. Maybe a little bit of red as well, but not too much. I want the roof of the cathedral to be a sort of brown colour, so I'm using, actually I want it to be like a grey brown, so I'm using, I'm using blue and brown together to give us a grey, and I'm starting to paint in some of those windows as well. Now I might use some of that grey somewhere else as well. Now, usually when you're painting a picture and you're using one colour, it makes sense to use that colour somewhere else. So when you have a certain colour on your brush, think about using it somewhere else too. Now, there are lots of red roofs in Norwich, so I'm going to, well, red brickwork. So I'm going to use a sort of red colour down here to represent the houses. So that represents kind of brickwork. Most brickwork in Norwich is kind of on the kind of reddish side, so red's going to slightly dominate a bit. So I'm putting in lots of areas of red. So I'm adding red all over the place, really. Okay, so I'm making use of the red. Now, there are trees in the foreground, so I'm going to use red mixed with green there. That gives me a nice kind of grey. The next tree is going to be a bit more green. You can see there the colour is actually quite intense. The Dale Rowney colours, as I've mentioned before, are quite intense. Then I'm using green mixed with yellow there to give different colorations of the tree. And this is all to do with the intersections to give us the sort of patchwork of colour that we're trying to achieve. And I'm aiming to have more intense colours at the bottom, if you like, in the foreground than at the back, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm using brown mixed with green and red. I'm going to give us a kind of blue area here, just so it recedes a bit. Don't mind the colours mixing in together. I think I need to do a bit more work on the cathedral itself. So I've got very light kind of grey, which is basically very dilute yellow, mixed with a bit of purple, not too much, maybe a kind of grey roof there. Okay, that probably doesn't need to be worked on much more. Now, these other areas, the colours we choose are really up to us. So I'm starting to use, that's quite a nice brown there, I'm starting to use colours, reds and browns, just to fill in some of these other areas, to give the impression that we've got some kind of patchwork quilt going on. That's a nice kind of weaker brown there. I think I'll use that colour up there too. So I'm starting to broaden out, and I'm starting to paint some of the background as well. Maybe a nice green there. I'll just use my finger there just to knock it back a bit. It's quite strong. I'll use that green there, and you'll see that in the end these patches of colour will probably, hopefully, lead to some kind of patchwork quilt design. Now I'm starting to invent colours here. I'm starting to not look at the actual photograph in front of me, which is fine. that's entirely up to you, really. This is more of a blue-green over there. The colours that you choose ultimately will be down to how the picture's looking and what colours you think ought to be used. Okay, you don't need to be a slave to the colours in front of you. I'm actually running out of yellow, which is a shame, really, but I need to buy a new set. I need to order a new set from Amazon. I'm going to put down a very strong red down there. So you can see that this picture's coming together. You also notice that when Paul Klee did Tunisia, sometimes he painted some of the lines, and I think that might be, you know, a nice thing to do sometimes. So I'm painting in some of those structures there. Not all of them, but just some. Might make those kind of brown down there. Keeping it very, very loose. We use that kind of brown there as well. My intention is to kind of use the same colour all over. So I've used brown in a few patches there. I'm going to make this a bit more blue there, maybe a bit more purple, red there. I'll make that red as well. You can see there that there's a developing sort of patchwork feel coming along. Some of the colours are more realistic than others. I'm painting the St John's a sort of brown colour. I'm making the church next to it sort of grey. I'm making the 1960s tower block there. A shadow on one side and maybe a bit more sort of lighter, sort of golden on the other side to give it a sort of three-dimensional solidity. Same with the castle there. Brown on one side, blue on the other. So that gives the idea of a sort of shadow, you know, if you get my drift. Use the same grey down there, just finish that area. There's St Peter Mancroft. I might make that church there sort of brown. I'll probably do actually, I think really a bit of brown there. Brown there. Remember there's a sort of triangle coming in here, so I need to just think about that. Maybe some intenser colours more in the foreground. You can see here that if I want to, I could make this painting a lot more intense and less watery. And that's something I could consider, but for the demo, I think I'm going to stop really quite soon, because I think that should give you an idea of the kind of thing that you could look for. Just need to balance up this tree structure a bit more. It looks a bit weak at the moment, so I'm making that just a bit darker. And the same goes for that too. I hope that kind of gives you an idea, some ideas about a possible approach to painting a different view. We've moved away from Paul Klee, but we've used his ideas in sectioning up a painting, a watercolour, like this. So, what should you do? Well, if you want to, you could paint Norwich. Why not? Nice place to paint. Or you might decide to use your own photograph and use the same idea of sectioning up a picture by extending lines up and down, like I've done. Or you might decide to maybe paint or draw something in real time. Again, sectioning up your pictures into a sort of patchwork quilt, following these kind of ideas. If you really want to copy what I've done, then I'll just leave this on screen for a bit so you can have a look at it. Now you can see that I'm starting to overwork it a bit. There's no real need because it's a demonstration. I could decide at this point to start using stronger, intense colours, but I think in terms of a demonstration, that's probably enough. So what should you do? Ultimately, what you should do is to look at a Paul Klee, copy it, just draw it. If you want to, paint it. Then put it to one side. And if you are doing something like I've done, where you're breaking down a view into simplistic, simplified geometric forms, then do that by extending vertical, horizontal and horizontal lines, and also yeah, vertical lines up and down, extend those lines, and also horizontal lines across. And also, if you want to, try to create some triangles in there as well. So that's what I suggest you do as one approach if you're doing this kind of work. So there you go. I'll just leave that there just for a moment or two so you can get an idea of what I've done. And then I suggest that you show your work next week, and I look forward to seeing what you've done then. Okay, so it's bye for now. See you next week.